Welcome everybody to Popcorn Therapy, where the stories we love tell us something about who we are. Today I'm going to be having a conversation with my good friend Katie Thorpe on Nightbitch and If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, which are two movies in kind of a suite of movies that are coming out right now about motherhood, parenthood, the social and internal pressures on that experience. And both of us are mothers with young children. And so we wanted to just kind of chat about it and have this conversation. So before we jump in, we are absolutely going to be doing spoilers for these two movies. We're going to be talking about our experiences with these movies, like where we're coming from, not necessarily analyzing the films themselves. But there will be spoilers. So it'll probably be a better experience if you have watched at least one of these movies before you listen in to the conversation. Quick little recap, just so we know what we're talking about. Nightbitch is a movie starring Amy Adams that is based on a novel of the same name by Rachel Yoder. And this is a movie about a woman who she's mostly alone caring for her 2-year-old child. And the movie feels very magic realist to me. There's some connection to dogs that she's encountering. She starts to feel like she's turning into a dog. It's not 100% clear if it's hallucinatory or real. And the movie keeps that as a little bit of a question. And so she kind of goes through her journey of learning about her motherhood through that primal experience of feeling like there is a dogness, like a wildness within herself there. And then If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You is also about a mother who is mostly alone caring for a child who is a little bit older, but this child has a mysterious illness, which is requiring her to have a feeding tube at night. And the mother in this story is really just kind of trying to survive, trying to figure out what to do. Right at the beginning of the movie, her ceiling caves in. She's got a massive hole in her ceiling. They can't live at home, and so they go and live at this motel where they have sort of their experiences. In both of these movies, the characters are named Mother, which I think is quite significant because that is the archetype, the identity that we are discussing here. And I think both of the characters struggle with the identity that they had before they became, capital M, mother. So they remain unnamed in these films. That's one thing these two movies have in common. So that's what we're going to be getting into. Please enjoy this conversation with me and Katie Thorpe, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back to Popcorn Therapy. I'm very grateful to have Katie Thorpe here with me today to talk about Nightbitch and If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. I'm especially grateful because we did a whole 90-minute chat about this already and the recording failed. So Katie is gracious enough to come back and do it again. So we're going to see how the conversation evolves second time around as well. So Katie, I would love for you to just introduce yourself, like share a little bit about, who you are, how you're coming to this conversation, whatever you'd like to say.
Great, thanks. Hi, I'm Katie. I am one of Julie's close friends. First and foremost, I use the pronouns she, her. I live in Calgary, Alberta, the traditional territories of the Treaty 7 people of Southern Alberta. And I work in municipal government in the field of community development, and I'm currently on maternity leave with my second kiddo. And so I'm happy to be here today to chat with Julie. We could chat forever about this topic. So, happy to do it all over again.
Yeah, Katie and I got to know each other between our children. So we had each had one child, and we're sort of bonding over some fertility issues on having that second one. And Katie's sister-in-law is a good friend of mine, so that's how we got connected. And since then have just been like texting or leaving voice notes or whatever it is, visiting, seeing each other. And a lot of what we talk about is like the horrors of parenthood. And so I think, Katie, it was actually you that wanted me to watch Nightbitch. I think you had some thoughts about it before I had seen it. So what brought you to these movies? why did you think they were interesting?
Yeah, so for Nightbitch, I remember just scrolling Instagram and seeing a clip of Amy Adams doing her opening monologue and talking just about how exactly what I was feeling postpartum, but it's a clip of her meeting a colleague, the woman who took over her role after she had given birth and stayed home with her child, running into her at the grocery store. And the question that was asked to her, it was, how do you feel? Like, it must be so nice to be at home with him all the time. And her reaction to the woman was, yeah, it's great. Like, it's so nice. I love it. However, there's a split screen to her really telling how she feels, of just saying how she feels like she's caught in this trap of her own making, and due to plain old biology and societal norms and gender roles, she feels trapped. And it just was such a good snippet for me of articulating kind of those feelings, and how both of them can be true at the same time, of yeah, it is great, but there's also this other side too, and holding those both at the same weight in a way. So that's how I saw Nightbitch, and then I immediately sent it to you because I'm like, look at this, just clip.
Yeah, and part of the reason I find these movies interesting is that there's a bit of a trend of that topic happening right now. There's these two, and then there's also Die My Love, which I haven't seen yet, but is also, I think, about postpartum psychosis, I guess. And then there was also All Her Fault. And then I think you sent me another movie, actually, called, like, Mom.
Yeah.
Which I haven't seen yet either. But it's all these movies coming out about, like, parenthood as horror film. It was quite a few years ago, actually, that I saw The Babadook. I think that was before I had kids. But that was an incredible movie for, like, the metaphor of what it can feel like to be alone with especially a difficult child. So if you haven't seen that one, you should, and maybe we'll talk about it, because it's a few years ago. But a lot of these movies are coming out right now that are about this, really validating, I think, the difficult, like the shadow side of the experience of parenthood, to the point where, especially in If I Had Legs, I feel like there was less of that side of it where you do enjoy some parts of, being with your young children or whatever it might be. So my experience with Nightbitch, I actually sat my husband down to watch it with me, partly because I thought he might relate to some of it himself. We have different experiences. So the work that I do, I'm a therapist, I'm a writer, I set my own hours. It's pretty flexible. I can do more or less depending on what I feel like I have the capacity for. I can decide, like, what times of day my shifts are and so on. My husband, not that way. He is in the military, and it's very much like, you go to work when we say so, you can't be a minute late, and if we tell you working all night, you're working all night. If we tell you you're leaving for a month, that's what you're doing, which means I've often been left alone doing the childcare and home stuff many, many times. And so when he is here, he wants to be as helpful as he can be, and I think he really feels the pressures of that sometimes. And I thought it was kind of interesting, like, the two of us watching it and having such different experiences of kind of the same thing. We're in the same family, and we both feel pressures, and we both feel, like, the difficulties of it, but there are ways in which that's heavier on him, and there are certainly ways that that's heavier on me as well. And one thing that we'll talk about, I think, as we get there, is the men in these movies, because I think they're actually kind of similar in both of them. And then the day that I watched If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, I was at home with a sick baby and also sick myself. I was about to get diagnosed with my second round of strep throat. It was like the next day I went to the clinic. I was like, I still don't feel very good. So I was not feeling well, and my baby was feverish, and we were just like, that experience that you have sometimes where you just have to drop everything and have a sick baby laying on you. And it is also that double experience of, like, there's nowhere I'd rather be. Like, I'm so grateful that I can be here and hold this baby that I worked so hard to have, and be his comfort and be with him all day. Like, there's definitely nowhere else I'd rather be. And this part of me being like, I can't get any work done. I want to get out of the house. Like, I'm starting to go stir crazy. Like, it felt really depressing too. Especially because I wasn't feeling well. I think if I had been feeling better, it would have been different. But then watching this movie about like, oh, just the intensity of the experience of caring for a child. So in a way, I feel like it was kind of a bad day for me to watch it, or maybe the best day for me to watch it because I was relating to it a lot that day. I watched Nightbitch a second time before we had this conversation, and I actually found it even lighter and more fun having watched If I Had Legs. I was like, oh, this is has a happy ending. It's like, I found it a little more disturbing maybe the first time around, but yeah, it's a little more of a fantasy. It has a little bit more of a positive sort of perspective, which I've seen criticisms of, but it's a bit of an easier watch, I would say. If I Had Legs is like a hard watch.
Oh yeah, it's one of those ones where I felt a lot of anxiety, like watching it, and feeling like a lot of empathy for her, for the main character, and just wanting her to get a win, like some sort of small win, and just still feeling that empathy for her after she made some pretty bad choices. But really just, yeah, feeling for everyone in that kind of way, like, and just feeling like, okay, she needs to do this or that, but then also being like, is that the right option? I don't know. And it wasn't really clear as to what path she could take and what would make the situation better. And that was caused me even more anxiety, I think, watching it.
Yeah, I've heard people describe that movie as a however long panic attack. Like, the whole movie is just watching a panic attack. And it's interesting because anxiety is an old friend of mine. I've had anxiety pretty much my whole life. And I had pretty bad postpartum anxiety with my first. And I was kind of laughing about it the other day because I was so concerned about whether or not my husband would shake the Tylenol bottle enough before he gave the Tylenol to the baby. Like, I couldn't even let my husband give the baby Tylenol because I didn't trust him to shake the medicine enough to mix it up. Like, at the time, that felt quite reasonable to me. you know, and like, we had a lot of conflicts around him being like, you are micromanaging me, and me being like, you're doing it wrong, you know? And not that we don't have that dynamic at all anymore, but I'm much, much more relaxed with my second. And I think a lot of where that anxiety comes from is just this incredible feeling of responsibility, right? Like, you suddenly have this small baby that, like, there's the responsibility on you as a parent, but I think also in our culture that responsibility is so much stronger for the usually female side of the heterosexual relationship. Men have not been trained to do the level of emotional labor that women and people raised as women are trained to do, right? Like, I think so many of us just learned really early on to pay attention to other people's moods, think about what other people's needs might be, fill those needs before they consider it, right? And when we have a small baby, it's like, if I don't think about shaking the Tylenol, like, he's not going to think about having to do that, right? He's going to miss it because, which he wasn't. But I mean, that's where that comes from, I think. And so I feel like If I Had Legs, one of the layers of that movie was really about her feeling like it was just all up to her and nobody would tell her what to do. And nobody could tell her what to do. Nobody knew what to do, but it still felt like it was life or death, like what she decided. And I think that is incredibly anxiety inducing, right? It's like, I'm not sure that's right. You know, like, I feel like the way to raise a child, there's a bit of a fantasy of this idea of like raising a child with a village, this idea that we should have grandmothers and aunts and uncles and friends and cousins, and like there should be so many people involved in our child rearing, but the way that we do it is incredibly isolating, which you and I have been experiencing in different ways, where like often it is like the female partner in a heterosexual pair who is alone at home with the child, and that's it all day, right? Even if you go to mom and baby or whatever it is, it's like there's still this sense of like that is your responsibility. And it's a massive responsibility. Like having my first, I remember thinking, you know, I've just been hired for this 24/7 job that has infinite manuals, but none of them are the right one, and nobody will tell you which one is the right one. You have to decide for yourself, and you don't have any. I mean, I'm one of those moms that, like, I didn't have a ton of people around me who had kids. There aren't a lot of kids in my family. Like, I felt a little out of my depth, I was just like, I don't know what to do with this thing. And so it felt really scary to miss shaking the Tylenol. If I'd missed shaking the Tylenol, like, what bad thing was going to happen. So I think that's a lot of where it came from, and a lot of what I felt when I was watching If I Had Legs.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. When you first have a baby, and when you are the person in the partnership who is giving birth to that baby, unless you're very, very intentional, it's likely you're going to be the one who's spending the majority of the time with them, just based on feeding and biology, essentially. And feeling that total sense of identity switch, like, immediately, like you're not working anymore. You're not going and doing the things that you used to do. And if, like, socializing with friends, a lot of friends I have as well don't have children, and doing physical things like fitness or activity, your body is still recovering. And that identity shift, that self-identity shift, was really a struggle the first time around, of coming to terms with that, and then being enmeshed in this whole other world. And then I'm finding, like, just what you're hitting on with the emotional labor pieces, and that coming up as well postpartum, and then continuing, like, what conversations are you having with your partner of, like, well, who's going to be the one who stays home with a kid when they're sick? Who's going to be the one who's making all those meetings or arrangements, or looking into what daycares we go to, or what programs we're doing, how we're going to travel as a family? Like, there's all these little pieces that kind of just get thrown on you as parents that you might not been totally prepared for, and then I feel like it's often that it does fall on, like, the mother, because of just the way that we've been trained, our gender norms, our society pieces, and that showed up so many times in both Nightbitch and If I Had Legs, because it was just a constant default. The default was the mother was going to take care of it, no matter what other things they had going on in their life, working, not working, personal things. No, it was their job. It was their responsibility that they're not getting recognition for, or paid for, or any of these things. It's just the default.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I have texted each other about, like, the incredible task of packing for a trip of a family of four. Like, the last time we went somewhere, I feel like I spent like 24 hours packing. I was just like, how am I still packing? What's happening? My husband's like, what are you doing? Like, it's not that hard. And I was just like, oh my God, you don't, like, a baby, a 5-year-old, 2 adults, like, I'm not even packing for him. I know some moms in this scenario will pack for their husband. I'm not doing that for him, but it was a lot, right? Yeah, so, I mean, I know that that opening monologue in Nightbitch was really impactful for you. The montage that happens right after that was a big one for me. It's just her making breakfast in the same way over and over again. She's having her coffee, she's making dinner, she's having her wine. Like, the kid is in these different pajamas. And in that beginning part, I was like, oh, I have those pajamas. Like, I have that little Goodnight construction site book. Like, there were so many things that just felt really like, wow, okay, this is what it feels like. Like, it can really feel like Groundhog Day. And it isn't, in the sense that the children do grow so quickly, and, like, you can look back and be like, oh my God, I can't believe this time has passed. But in the moment, that is really what it feels like. It's just this repeating pattern over and over again. And I feel like the movie expressed that really well in that moment in Nightbitch. And I'm curious just to know, like, what other parts of either of these movies, like, either you loved or were resonant for you or stuck with you? Like, what were the kind of moments and scenes that really brought some things forward for you?
Yeah, one like really small one was just when she was looking in the mirror and she's like, "Oh, what do we have today?" And it's like she had just got a second, right? Like I think she just put him to bed and was like looking in the mirror, was like, "Oh, what's going on?" And like I remember having that moment of like just I don't know what time it was. It could have been in the middle of the night. Who knows when I've been up with my little one, but like looking, I was like, "What is on my face?" I'm like, "Oh." I'm like, that's a new wrinkle. I'm like, that's a new wrinkle. And it was just that I didn't even notice that. Like, for how long has that been there? Who knows? Who cares? Like, when others' needs are just like completely put above yours. And then I can say that I did have a little bit of that same hesitation when she was didn't want to join the mom and or the parent and baby class, and like was like, I don't want to be just friends with somebody just because they're in the same situation with me at this moment of being a mom. And I totally had that feeling too at times where I was like, I I have a lot of friends. I want to spend time with my friends and I want to do this with them. When it wasn't always accessible to me to be able to do that. And then going and joining the, parent and baby yoga or the different groups and really embracing it once I got into it and realizing that like you kind of I needed that sense of community or someone who's going through the same sort of similar situation as me, and it really embracing it too, like with the women who I was meeting, of being able to relate almost immediately and like get each other's numbers and be like, oh, this is happening with me today, this is not, or are we in the same situation? So it was I related in that sense too.
Yeah, I think my favorite scene in Nightbitch is when she finds the dog nipples on her body. And because she's sort of slowly turning into a dog, or maybe it's in her mind, or we don't really know, but she's kind of like, what's this? And then she's just like, oh, perimenopause. It's just, I feel like, you're told any symptom is perimenopause, right? Like, I feel like that's just, it's one of the ways that women's health issues are disregarded. It's just like, oh, it's just your hormones, or it's just menopause, or whatever it is. Like, on that level, it was funny, but also in the same way where I've had so many moments in my pregnancies and postpartum and so on, where like I really feel like body horror is the genre for these movies because there are so many strange things that happen to your body that you're not expecting. Like my last pregnancy, I had so many like moles and skin tags that appeared out of nowhere. Like it's just this weird thing where your body is changing. And lately I'm like really negotiating with these little my postpartum hair regrowth has got this cute little like bangs, and they keep wanting to go straight up. And I have to like really negotiate with them. I'm just like, what do I do with you? Which is just it's just strange, right? You're just like, what is that? Like, that's a weird, thing that's happening, let alone, C-section scar and like all of the different, prolapses or whatever that you can experience. Like it can, horrifying is kind of the word for it, where you're just like, wow, this is really strange. And primal. And I think that's part of what Nightbitch speaks to, is that there's something biological, physical, primal about it that can be seen as powerful. And I have seen some criticism about that, in the way that it's kind of like, because women are biologically designed, quote unquote, to have babies, therefore it's like this powerful thing that they can have, and they just have to tap into that power. Like, I do get that the criticism of that is not everybody feels that way. Not everybody feels it is powerful. It also isn't biologically possible or easy for everybody, right? Like, there are a lot of women who struggle to have babies. You and I have been through some things around that. And, there's just the gender binary thing there and everything. So I feel like there's an essentialism that can be criticized there. And at the same time, I kind of get it, right? And just as to that piece about the other moms, I feel like that's actually part of the identity shift that happens, right? When you have kids, is all of a sudden your rhythm is totally different. Your energy is totally different. The things that you're thinking about and the way your brain works often can change. And I feel like when I've had friends who've become moms, I've had to make a really concerted effort to like be there for them in a different way because they need different things, right? You know, they can't, you know, sit down and drink wine and talk till late into the night because they're going to be woken up at 5, 6 in the morning the next day, no matter what they're doing, right? And then for me too, I feel like I've had some friends really stuck around because they've had that awareness of that change, and then some who haven't, right? Because it is such a shift. And then it's these moms that suddenly this bond becomes so much stronger because it's like, oh, now you get it, like you're in the club and like you understand. And moms like you who I feel like I can talk about these things openly with and who will tell me. And then I have those experiences of like at Mom and Baby, I'm trying to get to know people and be like, how's it going? And I remember being there after I had seen the public health nurse, and like every time I go to the public health nurse, I feel shamed about something. Like, you should be doing this and not that, and you're not doing enough of this. Like at 8 weeks, they were like, he should be holding his head up by himself. I'm like, at 8 weeks? Like, are you sure? Like, he's not doing that yet, you know? And so I feel like that was what was happening for me. And she was just like, oh, we're great. She's sleeping great. And like, she's a great baby. And I'm great. And I was just like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're not going to be friends then, because I feel like I can't have that. I mean, I don't know. I'll never know, I guess, what her whole story was. But I feel like when you have other moms that can be honest about it and get it and understand that, like, you might talk on the phone, but it'll be 10, 15 minutes and then you'll have to go because something's going to happen. Or, you know, you're going to have texts from your friend coming in at 3 a.m. when they're nursing, and you'll get it when you get it. And like, there's just, it's a different way of looking at the world. And I feel like some of that grief of the identity shift can be like who your friends were and like the types of experiences that you had, even just going out or whatever it was. Like, you don't have the freedom that you used to have, right?
Yeah, during my first mat leave, I had a friend's bachelorette party to go to, and it was somewhere like we were flying to it, and so I had to be so prepared, and but it was something I was so looking forward to, just feeling that, like, feeling a little bit like myself again, of being able to say yes to that, being around that group of women. I needed it so bad. And it felt like a little bit of me again, of like, oh, I am someone outside of taking care of another's needs constantly. So yeah, that was a lifesaver for me, for sure.
Yeah, there was another part that that really stuck with me, and maybe we can talk about the men as well a little bit in this movie, or in these movies. So in Nightbitch, there's a moment when the mother, and I'm pretty sure in both of these movies the characters are named Mother. I don't think they have names outside of that, which I think again speaks to that identity where you become subsumed by Mother and then you kind of forget like who you were before. So in Nightbitch, they've separated. She's kind of hit her limit and she's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, you're not helping me. You know, like he's giving this bad advice, to her. And she's just like, you have no idea what I'm going through. Like, you need to get out of here. And he takes the kid to his like little apartment building. And he's just like, I think everyone there is just like sad divorced dads. And it's just all these sad kids sitting around the pool. And she says something like, oh, I just think about all the sunburns because the dads wouldn't think to bring sunscreen. And he was like, haha, I didn't even think of that. It's just like, yeah, like you didn't think of that, right? That's kind of what this is about. And so I liked that moment because I feel like, you know, the way the emotional labor can feel sometimes is that you are thinking ahead to these to someone's needs, right? That you're anticipating needs that haven't been expressed yet. And there's a Bluey episode about the dad bringing the kids to the pool and leaving mom behind. And they're kind of trying to teach the kids a lesson about like practical things being boring. And they forgot the sunscreen, they forgot the floaties, they forgot the towels. Like, they have nothing that they need, right? No snacks, no water, nothing. And then eventually mom shows up and she's got all of this stuff. And it's like, oh, see, like, aren't practical things important? But I think it's significant that it's the mom who shows up with all with the sunscreen, right? And so in Nightbitch, there's a separation and then a reconciliation. And I think the reconciliation is really interesting and feels kind of aspirational to me in a way. Like, it feels like part of the fantasy of that movie. There's a moment where he says, I didn't get it, and I am in awe of you. And that's kind of the beginning of them having this reconciliation around, like, we never had a conversation about what it would mean to separate out this labor and how are we going to do that differently and so on. Like, it's quite beautiful, I think, to see a relationship reconciling in that way, because I feel like that's so much of where the resentment comes from when you are weighted down with all of this emotional labor that he's not thinking about, right? And I think some of it is feeling unseen, feeling unheard. Like, my husband was telling me the story the other day about a friend who, with their first baby, she had a maternity leave and she stayed home. And he would come home sometimes and be like, why didn't you clean the kitchen? Like, none of the dishes are done, you've been home all day. Like, why haven't you been doing this? And then with their second baby, he took a paternity leave and she went to work right away. And he was like, oh, now I understand, years later, having gone through it, like, why you were not able to do the dishes, because I am not able to do the dishes, right? And so I feel like there's something about, even if it's not corrected for, in the sense that, like, the labor doesn't change, if that other partner can see, like, I get that this is really hard for you and I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, that can mean so much, right? And I feel like if I had legs, she has such an experience of not being seen and understood, not being appreciated for what she's doing, like, certainly not by her kid, who is just like an annoying voice in the background through most of the movie. And we actually don't see the kid's face until the very end, which is an interesting sort of cinematic choice, I think. But the dad is just like, why aren't you just dealing with this? Like, why aren't you getting this done? The hole in the ceiling, like, why aren't you just getting it fixed? And he comes home and just magically fixes it somehow at a certain point. And that's extra frustrating for her, because she's like, what do you mean you just fixed it? Like, I've been trying to get this done and, like, I haven't been able to do it. And there is still this sense of, like, well, like, there's something wrong with you, right? And I feel like there's so much of that movie, she just doesn't feel like anyone gets what is going on with her.
In Nightbitch, where he's like, well, you really just got to get ahead of your week here and, like, schedule.
So annoying.
Get your, and happiness is a choice, and all of that drove me nuts. Because it was just, she wasn't seen, like, for all of the work that she was doing, those other pieces. And then when he comes home, he felt like, well, I just can't, like, he doesn't want me to do it. Or when she finally sits down on the couch and he's like, oh, I got bath time, I got it. And he's like, oh, can you get me this? Can you get me a towel? Oh, can you warm up the towel? Oh, he wants this, he wants that. Oh, we don't have enough milk. Like, just all those little pieces were just infuriating, but, like, so relatable too. Of you're it's running so smoothly because there's someone doing it. There's a mom who's doing it, or a woman who's doing it. In that case, and having him come around in the end, and having that conversation of, like, I didn't realize this division of labor. I would have wanted to have a conversation beforehand if we would have known. That felt good. that ending, it kind of all wrapped it up and was like, okay, yeah, like, and it seemed like they
like,
were
this film sees me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's probably why I liked it so much. Because it tied it up in a bow in the end. And it's like they were going to do things differently moving forward. And that's, like, the ideal of, like, you want to be seen and, like, appreciated for the work that you're doing. And she was able to create and do what she needed to do, to have her piece of identity back, in a sense. And then... in If I Had Legs, it was just so infuriating, like, all the men in the movie, but the absent kind of father who'd been away traveling, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you fixing a hole in the wall? Why aren't you fixing our daughter? Why aren't you fixing yourself? And the pressure that he was putting on her to be like, well, you got to go to this thing, you got to do this, and her still having that, trying to keep that, like, it's okay, like, feeling those feelings of abandonment, almost in rage, and then just being like still at the end of like the text or the you know, it's okay, it's gonna be okay, we're gonna get better, and having that like false belief, like, and sharing it to her partner, but then also like to herself in a way of like, it's okay, we're gonna get through this, everything's gonna get better somehow, even though the steps that she was taking were not getting her there because of, you know, and the support that she was receiving was not
No.
not helping her in that situation. And then yeah, and then that one line from Caroline's husband of, well, I'm working, she needs to be with the baby, and the therapist going on and on of like, this is an emergency, like this is your child. And the, I think what it meant to me was the singular focus of the men of like, but I'm working, this is what I need to do, this is the important thing that I'm doing, whereas everything else just falls on the mom in that case of taking care of themselves and then the baby, like when you are in such a vulnerable place postpartum. And the mom in If You Had Legs was working too, and she made that comment at one point, was just like, yeah, that'd be great, but I also have a full-time job, like I'm not, you know, like this other piece is a full-time job on itself. So
Yeah.
and another one was just how when the patient, like the one comment that he made of when she was dealing with an emergency, and he's like, she's mine, this is my time, and
Right.
just it felt like, and it had to be another male to be like,
That's
whoa,
right. He said she's mine.
hold
Yeah.
up. But she's like that ownership piece of like, well, this is my time, I need her at this moment. And it just was another indication of all the needs that she had, and the sense like of ownership to say, this is my time for her to be with me. And that really, no, like they're dealing with an emergency here, and she is her own person. Like
Yeah.
it was a weird but very powerful comment to illustrate that like her needs were being pulled in so many just directions, and boundaries weren't being kept. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that case with Caroline, she was having postpartum, you know, depression, anxiety, psychosis. Like, I don't know what it was exactly, but she was terrified she was going to hurt her child.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, we assume, I guess, why she left the child alone in the therapy office. And what a shocking moment when the husband is like, I'm at work, like this isn't my problem. And I think obviously that was extreme, but that can be how it feels, right? Is that, and I know that, you know, if my husband got a call, he would leave whatever it was to like go and get the baby. Like he would definitely be as concerned about it as I would be. Yeah. But there have been so many moments when, like, this isn't his fault, but, you know, especially when he was in full contract in the military and I, you know, was doing what I was doing, like, it would just always be by default that I would be the one taking care of any issues with the kids during the workday, because there's no option, right? Like, he couldn't, especially in the military, it's like, you know, it's like against the law for him to leave basically during the day, like he'd be AWOL. So he couldn't, like, it wasn't about him not wanting to help, but like he really couldn't. And I feel like that feeling has been a source of conflict between us, where the feeling, and again, not necessarily coming from like his or my beliefs, though I think that these things are internalized by us, right? Because the culture teaches it to us all the time, but that his work matters and mine doesn't, you know, and he makes more money than me, therefore his work is more important. I think men are also taught, you know, from a young age that that's how they matter in society, is by making money, right? And so, you know, they're not valued for their childcare, you know, abilities or whatever it is. Although, of course, it is this thing where like a random person might find that out and be like, oh my God, he's amazing, he's the best ever, you know? And it's just sort of like, that's not because that's fair, it's because the bar is in hell, right? For what we're expecting men to do. And so I feel like patriarchy is a source of conflict between us, I think. And it's just not something that came up that much before we had kids, right? Because when there are children, there is a division of labor, right? There's a lot of emotional labor that has to be done. There are so many things that are coded as feminine versus coded as masculine and so on. And even some of those pieces where he, sometimes will feel like the only value I bring to this family is the money that I'm making, which is like, again, not coming from me, like that there is this pressure that it kind of feels like that's what I'm valued for and that's the only thing that I can bring. And so, there have been those moments where it's just like, man, this would be a different relationship if we weren't in a patriarchal society, right? Like, yeah. It's just so powerful and in ways that we can't always see, right? So I think we see that to an extreme level in If I Had Legs. And, there are a lot of husbands that do have that feeling of just like, I don't know, it's your problem. Like, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm here to make the money. And I think that's what a lot of our dads, like the dads of our generation, that was the unspoken agreement, right? Is like, I'll go to work and like you handle the home stuff. I think a lot of us had moms that stayed at home, at least for some of the time and all that. And that's kind of the model that we grew up with. Like, I don't know about you, but I feel like I spent a lot of time thinking about, do I want kids? If I have kids, what do I want that to look like? Do I want to still work? Do I want to stay home? Like, how would I make that work? What kind of partner do I want in order to make that happen for me? Like, that's been such a conscious narrative for me in my life around creating the family that I want. And I just don't think my husband has been encouraged to think about things in that way, right? Like, to even consider those aspects of it, because again, it's different for us, right? So I think a lot of men are just going off of whatever they grew up with. They either liked it or they didn't, they'll sort of do it that way, or maybe they'll change a little something or whatever, but they haven't been sitting around thinking and talking in therapy like I have about, what do I want from this? How's this going to work for me? All of those things. And I feel like that's a place where we can come up against each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was discussing that with my husband too, just that idea of like, I think it's important for couples to kind of think about who's going to be taking over those pieces before even having kids. Like, who's going to be the communication with the daycare, or who's going to be the one responsible for all the medical pieces, like getting the shots and then keeping those records and just those small details. And he's like, well, I don't think you can plan everything like for parenthood. And it's like, of course not. But those pieces are important to kind of talk about before, because otherwise it's likely to be defaulted, especially when when there is a little bit of imbalance potentially with childcare, with one parent staying at home more than the other. I think those things can get missed. And just not having like the autonomy to go for a work lunch, or like have your drive to work or your commute to work, and just always being with responsible for another human being. It's a different sort of that is what you're main focus on. Even if you are going for a walk, walking the dog, you're still with your baby and your dog, and you're meeting their needs potentially, but not necessarily your own. So yeah, I think that those pieces can totally get missed or be defaulted, and without careful, like, intentional consideration beforehand.
And, because careers that are masculine coded, or like tend to have more men working in them or whatever, tend to make more money. And then the careers that are more feminine coded tend to make less. And that forces some women to stay home, and there's a moment in Nightbitch, I think, where they're talking about whether she should go back to work or not. And he says, like, well, the math doesn't quite make sense. And I remember hearing about, I think actually it was a colleague of Kaylin's a long time ago, who was just like, well, daycare would cost more than she makes, so she's just going to stay home. And it's like, whether she wants to or not, like, this was not a choice, right? And I feel like for me, it was so non-negotiable for me that I'd be working, even though I make so much less. And especially, but part of the reason I make less is because I'm only working part-time because I'm taking care of the baby half the day, right? And, because there are a lot of these other things that are kind of coming in, like, there's a reason why my career kind of gets held back a little bit. And I think you and your husband are a little bit more like on the same level in terms of the type of work that you do and like income and things like that. But that can be a really big issue. And that's patriarchy. That's not choices that we're coming in making as individuals, right? And yeah, I've had a few friends reach out to me about If I Had Legs because in a way that her life looks kind of similar to mine. Right?
Yeah.
She's a therapist as well. She has a husband who's away a lot. I can't remember what he does or if we find out what he does in the movie. But there is that same assumption that like his work matters more. He's making more money. She's working as a therapist. She's clearly burnt out. Like she has compassion fatigue for sure. She can barely care about these clients she's working with. And I mean, in a way, it sort of looks similar from an external perspective, but that's a very different experience, I think, than I have. And I know that some therapists will be working at a clinic with a massive caseload, and their only support is their colleague, right? Like, I think it's a huge sort of, it's inappropriate that her therapist is like her colleague down the hall. Like, ideally, you have a supervisor who is not like your peer, who is someone that you can go to get that support in some other way. And some, clinics have that built into the system. But for people like me that work independently, like I hire somebody to do that work for me. So I see my supervisor, monthly or whatever it is, and she helps me with my caseload. But I also get to choose my caseload. I get to choose the people I work with. Like the people who work with me are only people who want to be there. They've found me. They are interested in me. Like we're a good fit almost always, the people that reach out to me. Whereas in a clinic, you might have people forced to come because it's been mandated by the court, for example, and they have no interest in being there, but you have to do it anyway. That's a different experience. And I think the burnout and compassion fatigue happens faster in that sense. But it was, this movie was a bit of a nightmare from a Parenthood perspective, but it was also a bit of a nightmare from a therapist perspective. Yeah. Like looking at that, I was like, oh God, this is not what it should look like to be a therapist, like on any level for me. And I feel like people have had those experiences before of like Conan O'Brien as this therapist that is just so cold and unfeeling, There's lots to say there, but that was like a whole other level of the movie for me. It was just like, wow, this is upsetting therapy. This is harmful therapy, right? Like this is not helping people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that her husband was in uniform, so he might have been in the military too.
Maybe I blocked that out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too close.
I think that's why, people are reaching out because they're like, ooh, this is exactly kind of that same situation.
And there can be times when it feels like that, right? I had a month where my husband was away. Right. Well, it was like he was away 6 out of 8 weeks. Like he was just gone for most of it. And I had my little baby, like my 6-7-month-old baby and my 4-year-old at the time. And it was awful. Like it was awful. And, I was having this experience of feeling like, why can't I do this? Like what's wrong with me that I'm not, handling this better, and I felt guilty about needing someone to clean for me, needing the babysitter to come on the weekends. I just couldn't seem to get enough help to feel supported. And part of it is that my family's not around. And my mom came for the chunk of it that she could, but we don't live in the same city. So it's not like, she can just be there to help the whole time or anything. And I'm so jealous of people who have that. Because sometimes you have those moments where you're just like, I am totally overwhelmed and I really need help. And I don't have anybody, aside from people that I'm paying. And if you have money, that's helpful, but it's very expensive. And that can feel very, very intense. You're responsible for them 24/7, and you can pass them off to daycare or whatever it is you're paying for that time, but you have to make sure that you have all the things they need at daycare and that you pick everything up at the end of the day. And like, sometimes you have that daycare teacher being like, oh, so-and-so did this today, and like you gotta have a chat with them about it and all this stuff. It's like, whew, so intense. And I'm grateful that I have a helpful husband when he's here, because I know not all of them are that way, but it was, it felt impossible. And somehow I got through it. Like somehow we all survived, that month. But, it was, it felt like that nightmare a little bit. It felt like if I had legs that month a bit.
Everything on you. Plus you're working. Like, it's all the,
Well, and at the time I was trying to finish a manuscript for my book that's coming out this year. And so, my theory about I've been sick all January and just like sleeping the month away. But I think that's partly because it was such an intense year in so many ways. Like having the baby obviously is intense enough, but then there was also work. There's finishing this book. Rob being away a lot, like it was exhausting. So I think my body is kind of responding to that exhaustion right now and needing a little bit of time to just like really slow down. Because yeah, it was more responsibility than I feel like a human being can have. And I have more help than a lot of people I know, right? Like I have so much privilege in where I'm at, and like the fact that we can afford daycare and things like that.
Yeah.
I know that's not the case for everybody. And sometimes I look at these stay-at-home moms and I'm just like, wow, I'm in awe of you, right? There's a moment in If I Had Legs where she says, you know, I was not ever meant to be a mom.
Yeah.
This is not who I was supposed to be. And I have that feeling sometimes, even though I desperately wanted my children. I fought really hard to have them. Like, it's really important to me to be a good parent to them. But I definitely have that feeling sometimes where I'm just like, I just don't have the talent for this. You know, this just isn't my, and I imagine a lot of moms and dads feel that way. And it's that identity piece again, where it just feels like, man, I used to be a poet. I used to go out at night and I'd like do spoken word poetry, and I used to belly dance, and there's this like whole other life. It feels like a different person. Like I can't even relate to that version of me anymore. Not that I necessarily want to, you know, I've moved on in a lot of ways, but yeah, it feels like a real distance, maybe especially because of having a kid during COVID. I feel like that creates, there's like a little chasm there. But yeah, it's big.
I can absolutely relate to that, because what I felt when I first was on mat leave was, you know, I can't just leave for 3 hours to go do the thing that I did before, like to go to a fitness class or do, you know, go for a long run or walk or whatever. It's you're tied to this new being. But I found that with my husband's life, not much had to change in like hobbies or things that they could do. You know, like you can still go do that thing. You can go and have, you know, a long dinner with your friends, and I want you to in a way, but it's just like the recognition that I can't do that right now, and leave, you know, an infant. I guess I could, but it would be it would be more difficult to be able to pick up and leave, with preparing, feeding and scheduling and that sort of thing. So just having that being recognized and shown, and like there's times before where he said, oh, Katie couldn't do that like right now, so like maybe I'll sit this one out, like which I've really appreciated, because it's like, yeah, that piece of your identity is you can't rely on that as much anymore when you're in this state of postpartum or even motherhood moving forward. And just, the recognition of that was huge. And you see that in the other, in those movies too, where not much changes for the male counterparts and parents, but there's so much that's happening.
And I had a conversation with my old friend Jeremy on Parenthood on the podcast a few episodes back, and he also had kind of an interesting point, which is that the identity shift that happens with the gestational parent is that you're going through all of these physical changes, right? As you're you're pregnant, you're gestating, your brain is changing, all of these things, and in a way that prepares you for some of these shifts, whereas for men, they don't have any of that, right? And so suddenly there's a baby, and there can be this sort of like jolt into this new reality that they've had no biological preparation for. Jeremy was speaking from a place of his partner went to work pretty quickly, and he ended up doing a lot of parental, so he was alone with the kids a lot, and that was a very different experience for him, right? Because he didn't have this, and I feel like there, even if you're not breastfeeding, like breastfeeding is part of what you're talking about. It's like, okay, I got to pump, and then I'm going to be engorged, and it's uncomfortable, and like, what do I do when I get back? And then all this stuff, like, in some cases the baby won't take a bottle, like they'll only breastfeed, and then, that's stressful. But even without that, I feel like there's a way that like mom's smell, mom's touch, mom's voice, like that will tend to soothe the child quicker and more easily than dad. depending on the kid and the situation and so on. But I feel like that's part of what can make it hard for there to be an equal division of labor, because my baby now is taking a bottle just fine and stuff like that, but I still feel like it's something I want to think carefully about if I'm going to leave for the evening or for the day or whatever it is, because I think it's a lot harder in some ways for my husband to be alone with the two of them, and for me it's a little easier.
Yeah.
Does that make it fair? Does that mean I don't know. Like, I think you have to kind of figure out for yourself and your family what makes the most sense. And maybe I'll just add on to that. Last time we had this conversation, a piece came up that I thought was quite interesting, which was about rage and postpartum rage. I think If I Had Legs, which I will briefly say, I did go and try to find out why it's called that. Because it never came up. Just like, what? Like, I thought there would be a moment where you'd be like, oh, that's why it's called that. Apparently the director just had that phrase in her head for many years and then wrote the film and just decided to title it that. So that's a bit of a weird reason, but I feel like it does have the emotional resonance of the film, which is, if I had legs, like, I don't have power, right?
Yeah.
And if I had power, I'd use it. Like, I feel like that is kind of the feeling of Rose Byrne's, the mother character, throughout. And there is so much rage. And last time we were having this conversation, you were also talking about kind of watching her not connecting to the support that might help her, like not reaching out to people. A$AP Rocky plays Jamie, who I thought he was awesome. I really enjoyed his part in the movie. And I kept wanting her to connect with him more, not necessarily romantically, but even as a friend or something. And it doesn't. Like, she kind of abandons him. He falls through the floor or something at her apartment and breaks his leg, and she just sort of leaves him. And so there's a lot of rejection of the kind of support that might help her. And also, I feel like there's that rage, like, from an evolutionary perspective, a lot of people do feel postpartum rage because there's this kind of mama bear energy that comes up in you when you have a little being that needs to be cared for. And especially if you are injured from birth, which many of us are, you kind of need a big bark because you don't have a big bite, right? Yeah. And so, there are different survival responses that you can have, but maybe one of them is rage, right? Like, get away from me. And I feel like you see a lot of that in If I Had Legs. And one thing I think that is interesting about that is I have a whole thing about anger from a therapist perspective. Like, I'm often working with people on, let's invite your anger. Let's figure out what your anger is trying to tell you. Anger is the emotion that protects yourself. It's the anger that protects your identity, right? Which is what part of what we're talking about, that you lose in many ways when you can lose when you have a baby or changes. And it tells you what your needs and boundaries are so that you can then communicate those, right? So anger is really important. And I feel like there are so many ways that our society has shut it down. It's like not okay to feel angry. Women's anger is shrill. Men's anger is like a whole other topic. But, it's a very difficult emotion for us to sit with. And, some of, I think, what it might be doing and what it might have been doing for the character in this movie is helping her to access her instincts, right? Her mama bear instincts, or I don't know if mama bear is the right way to phrase that, but like her instinct to know what's right for her kid and say, fuck you to the therapist who's not helping the daughter or who wants to keep the feeding tube in or whatever it is. Like, she has so many moments where she's like, I just want someone to tell me what to do. And maybe that rage was kind of trying to help her see, like, well, her instinct was to take the tube out, her instinct was to, and we don't ever find out what happens next or whether or not, those instincts are helpful or whatever it is. But I feel like there is a place where you can look at that rage as potentially trying to help her, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's interesting in Nightbitch too, because there is that rage, there is that instinct, and it showcases that the entire time of just her literally turning into an animal in a sense. But what kind of channels it or like makes it productive in a way is just her finding her community too, right? Like her finding that pack of others who are kind of might seem or look vulnerable in a sense, but then together they're kind of more powerful together in a sense,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was kind of cool to see. But like and again, tied up in a little bow, but like I do get that animalistic kind of vibe from both of them of like, I don't know how to make this okay, and I'm angry about it, and I need to do something to fix it. I don't know what that is, but I'm still gonna, I don't know, use what power I do have to kind of get there in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, so the rage is kind of a tool for both of them, right? And I feel
Yeah.
like in Nightbitch she uses it in a way that like she claims some space and some time for herself, and she leans into these wild instincts that help her, and like it becomes easier for her to parent when she's following those instincts, because like there's that moment where she puts the kid into the dog bed and he sleeps there all
Yeah.
night, and it's like the first time he's slept all night independently like in his life, and she's just like, oh, okay, great, this is great. So it's sort of a useful mitigation for her, whereas in Legs, less so. I mean, yeah, I don't know, like her coping mechanisms are different. So I wanted to ask you, I know that we both relate to the intensity and in some ways the horror of, being a parent, being a mother, as somewhat separate from that. And I'm curious about your thoughts about like how these characters mitigate that horror, and then how you do. Like, what does that look like for you in your life? How do you kind of manage all of these things? Not that I expect you to have a pat answer to that, but what are your thoughts about that?
I think in both movies, I felt for each of these characters in different ways, and I had a lot of empathy for them, regardless of the choices they were making. But I felt they were using what tools they had and what support they had, and in the best way they could. I really did feel that for both of them, and that's why I kept wanting them to get a win and to be able to kind of reconcile something or get something fixed that they needed in their lives. For but I can relate to that, and for me, I'm very grateful. I do have support. I have family here who's able to help me, and that is a huge support to my children, but also to me mentally, of just having people who know me the best and who are there to be my cheerleader and my support, and I feel more of myself when I'm around them. And same with friends and community, those who are going through the same things as me, experiencing it as mothers. I can really relate to those, and doing those like 3 a.m. text messages of like, oh my God, we're sick again, or just whatever we're going through, being able to share that and not get that judgment feedback. It's more just like, oh man, yeah, we're in the thick of it too. Hang in there. To my other friends who, who are maybe don't have kids or not in that season of life, and they are still inviting me to things and just saying, hey, I know you might not be able to do this like really late, concert and movie or whatever, but we're doing this tonight. Just still thinking of me and putting it out there that they're wanting to be around me, but it might not work out, and not judging that either. Those are some of the things that have really, really helped. And just like giving a lot of grace to myself and to my partner, my husband, of just like, we're trying. And you're right with, you don't know how you're going to be as a parent. It's one of those things that, you have a kid and you're like, okay, here we go. And maybe this spot in my life is not, or this time in their development is not, I'm not an expert at. I'm not, doing all the books or educational pieces, but there's other things that I'm better at, and like being able to like work with the support and the people that you have around you. And yeah, just a lot of patience and grace, and knowing that it is temporary. But when you're in the thick of it, it does not feel that way. Those are kind of how I've kind of worked worked as a parent recently, and reminders that I have moving forward. But yeah, curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I agree with you about all of that, really, and including the empathy for these characters who, even though she's like walking away from the monitor range of her her daughter whose machine is beeping incessantly, and she's on her third bottle of wine or whatever it is, and she's, like, these things, maybe they're not what I would do, but I get it, right? It's sort of like you can totally see that's the only place she has to escape, or it's the only comfort that she's getting, or whatever it is. She's doing her best. And yeah, I think that community is really important. I think having those other mom friends and non-mom friends who get it in their own ways. I think having friends who I can talk to really authentically and genuinely is something I just wouldn't be able to survive without. I'm grateful that I had kids a little later in my life. Like, even though sometimes I feel really exhausted and old and broken, I feel like by the time I had my first, which I was 36 or 37, I guess, I had done so much therapy that I had a lot better emotional regulation than I would have had even at 30, I think. I had worked through a lot more trauma. I had done a lot more thinking about like what mindful parenting might look like for me. Not that I wasn't blindsided by lots of aspects of it. Like, I'm not going to say I was prepared by any stretch of the imagination, but there are just some skills that I had built up to that point that I'm glad I waited to have. I also had a career that had enough of a foundation that I didn't totally lose my momentum when I took some time to have a baby, which again, if I had done that when I was 30, I wrote 2 books before I had my first, and so I'm grateful for that aspect of it. I also, to be honest, like, as we're thinking about this, I think my feminist rage and my postpartum rage has been a really important tool, even though it has brought forward some conflict between me and my husband. I feel like I have had this insistence and maybe entitlement to some self-care, to some time to myself, to going back to work when I wanted to. We've talked before about how, like, I don't think I would be doing so well mentally if I didn't have yoga to go to at this point, which I didn't actually when my first was born right away. But I feel like I have had this sense of like, I need that, and like, too bad. So either you are helping me, husband, or we are paying for someone to help me because I insist on having that. And so I feel like I have a little bit of a better relationship with the mom guilt than I would have if I was younger. And not that, again, the mom guilt comes up for sure. Like, I definitely have those days where I'm just like, I'm so bad at this. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't deserve to have this or whatever it is. But I feel like there is this feminist part of me that like knows how much that is a product of the patriarchal society that we live in, and that's not okay. And so I feel like having that rage allows me to force me and my husband to kind of look at it and be like, no, this is not going to work for me. You're going to do this. And like, that we've had to work through it. Like, it hasn't always been easy. And I'm very grateful I have a husband who is willing to have those conversations with me, willing to go to therapy with me and talk through some of the parenting stuff or whatever it is. Because he's great in that way, and like, we've both grown a lot, and that's part of the reason I even wanted to have a family in the first place, was to grow. But I feel like the rage is actually important with it, because the rage keeps showing up to tell me I have a need and I deserve to have that need met, or like I have a right to have that need met, right? Which is what I'm working with a lot of my clients on, is like having a right to have that need met, because you're a human being and that's all you need to be to have a right to have a need met, right? So
I love that framing of it, of like, this is serving me. This rage, this feeling, this anger is serving me in different ways. I'm going to take that because I haven't really looked at it that way before. Knowing that like it's there, and I'm I'm aware of it and like understand it, but like, yeah, it does have a purpose and it can help.
It does. So there's obviously more. There's always more to talk about with this stuff, for sure. And, classic to this conversation, I have to go run and get my baby from daycare before my couples therapy session later today. So it's just like, that's exactly what we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
So again, I really, really appreciate you having this conversation in the first place and the second place. I really appreciate you coming back and being willing to talk about it with me again. So thank you so much for all of those thoughts and for bringing me this conversation as well.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.